Hi, and welcome back for another devotional. I'm glad you're with me today as we are focusing in on 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 2. That's right, we got one verse today, but there's a lot packed in there, right? So before we jump into this one verse, let's get some context on what's going on. So throughout the last part of chapter 11 and the beginning of chapter 12, we see that Paul is boasting, but he's doing it in such a way that highlights his weakness and it points all the beauty, the strength, and the deliverance back to God. So in essence, the boasting of his weakness serves to glorify God, but it also serves to verify his apostleship. And this is done by highlighting God's direct intervening hand in every aspect, every circumstance, every suffering, every revelation and deliverance throughout Paul's life. He's being very comprehensive here. And this brings us to our verse today, verse 2, where Paul says, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. So the first thing to note is that Paul seems to be referring to someone else. He says, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up. So just reading that, we would automatically think he is talking about someone else. But when we look at the context of everything that Paul has been saying, it quickly becomes evident that he's talking about himself. And there are two main reasons why we can say that. First, the entire context of the previous chapter and the beginning of chapter 12 has been Paul boasting. We've been talking about this in his weakness about aspects of his ministry. Because we know that Paul's boasting here was to verify his apostolic credentials, it wouldn't have made any sense to relate this experience of going to heaven to another man. That would have actually undermined what Paul was trying to do. And secondly, in verse 7 of chapter 12, Paul talks about a thorn that was given to him in the flesh to prevent him from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, including what we're talking about here. So these two reasons help make it really clear that Paul is indeed talking about himself in this experience, even if it's in the third person. And one of the things he said is that he was caught up in the third heaven. So what is the third heaven? Well, scholars describe three different heavens. And the first heaven is the earth's atmosphere. Genesis 8:2 says the foundations of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained. The second heaven is considered to be interstellar space. If we look at Genesis 15:5, it says, and he brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and number the stars. If you are able to, number them. And he said to him, so shall your offspring be. And the third heaven is considered to be the abode of God, where God dwells. 2 Chronicles 30, verse 27 says, then the priests and the Levites arose and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came to his holy habitation in heaven. And so Paul says here in verse 2 that he was caught up to the third heaven, which means he went to the place where God dwells. Now, even though I want to go further, I'm going to stop myself because tomorrow's devotional will pick up from this point. So hopefully I've been able to help give you some better grounding to understand what's going on in verse 2, and that will hopefully lay a foundation for better understanding what will be happening in tomorrow's devotional. So I know it's short, but that's all right. God bless you guys. Love you, and we'll talk to you soon.